I think there's no magic bullet. You need a governance structure that fits with the type of organization and your priorities. There are probably some principles, and I think one is strong stakeholder engagement, that you have to remember what you're there for and who you're there for, and that has to be reflected in the governance. Linked to that, I think openness and transparency and good reports and information. And you need to invest time and effort in good governance. So you're talking about committees and training and education of committees, giving committees time to develop their knowledge before they take a decision.
It's really important to me that institutions carry on, and that it's not just that one person runs them for a certain amount of time and then they go in a completely different direction. The important thing to remember is that pension schemes, they last for decades, sometimes even centuries. And so we need to try and build some of that longevity into the teams that run them as well. And it's important to have that in the governance layer as well. So organizational resilience was the thing I wanted to really point up. And I think that's important to build in any organization. It's something I want to build in the organizations I'm working with now.
There's nothing different in the Sheringham Pension Fund to any other pension fund. And I really mean that. The key focus is simply making sure that we pay and continue to be able to pay those pensions when they fall due. That was exactly the same as life in the LGPS, but with a different context, a different funding model. And here, my operations are on a more international scale, but very similar in terms of the themes of what work we do day in, day out.
The one word that I think sums up how I think about investments is being pragmatic. It's that word pragmatic, because I don't think there's one right answer to how you should invest. I think every person, every institution needs to be flexible, and that their investment process, the one that's right for them, should reflect their experience, their resource, their governance structure, and really ultimately be aligned with their definition of success, which includes their time horizon. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. The big thing that I've really learned and taken with me, and I'm a huge believer in, is process. It really helped me when I was directly managing money. It's helped when I'm judging other managers.
I think maths is one of those things. You can miss a very important stage in the sort of early learning with maths. And when you do, you can get quite frightened or scared or assume you can't do it, but you can. And it doesn't matter what age you start, you can learn. I probably had to work 3 times as hard as anybody else. I've had to overcome any obstacles in my way by just sheer determination and hard work.
But I believe that if you're a responsible investor, it's better for you to engage, work with the company to get them to change, to do the right thing. And if they're not taking actions, if there is no improvement, then you can have your exit strategy in place. We all have to roll up our sleeves and do some work. So I believe in engaging before divestment.
The city is one of the oldest cities in the world. So there's a lot of history and tradition engraved in the City of London. And we need to be very careful how to balance what the modern City of London would look like, specifically with tackling racism, but also to remember some of the past at the same time. And finding that balance in some instances was a little bit of a challenge.
I think the time horizon is everything. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean just thinking about how long you measure investment performance. It means you have to be able to imagine the world at the end of your time horizon and its path along the way, and what will have been the good things to have invested in along the way. And probably the most striking example of that is how we're now thinking about climate change.
I think adaptability is absolutely key, but it's also a willingness to learn and an insatiable curiosity as to how things work. And whatever role you do, there are always going to be challenges. First of all, it's about watching and learning, and then thinking, how can I add value? But it's also about being willing to take risk, about different roles, changing roles, and then you acquire quite a different skill set that can be applied pretty much across the board.
And there was all sorts of opportunities, given that we'd brought assets in-house and we were now, at this point, running a majority of our equities in-house. we were able to apply a lot more of the ESG measurement directly to the internal investment processes. So I was able to work out how to improve the process on a kind of iterative basis, take the scoring, improve the process, and do the same the next year and the next year. So we've gone from that really, and to the point that this year we launched a new standalone document called our Statement for Responsible Investment Principles. And that lays out asset class by asset class what we're doing in terms of RI. And that's been a big leap forward.
I'm definitely seeing SDG goals that pop up more frequently than others. So, for example, SDG 13 around climate change, that one is very popular. And the SDG goal around sustainable renewable energy, that one is seen as a return opportunity. You then get most funds focusing on some of the economic related SDG goals. And then you get the more individually chosen SDG goals, which might be gender diversity or sustainable cities or health and well-being. I've noticed that health and well-being, not surprisingly, has become more popular since we've been experiencing the pandemic.
The modern approach to kind of trying to make passive investment more sustainable is to try and introduce low carbon indices, whereby through various methods you're trying to reduce the carbon emissions from a portfolio, and they almost all depend on some form of scoring. And my problem there is that the data scoring is a very young industry. There's all sorts of criticisms you can make about it, and that's not to say it has no value. I'm reluctant to invest a significant part of a portfolio on the basis of data which is not really robust.
I think as a non-executive, your role really is to support the team who do the management of the business day to day, but to question them. And I always think it's like holding up a mirror a lot of the time, showing people how it looks in the mirror and saying, is this really what you mean? Is this really what you want? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But it's very different from the executive role. I mean, I think the best description that I was ever given by it was by a friend. And she said, well, it's very simple. Eyes on, hands off.
I think I broke through the glass ceiling before anybody had talked about a glass ceiling. When I joined the markets, I was treated as a human being, and people responded to you on your ability and your ability to deliver and to perform as you were expected to do. But it wasn't in any sort of formal way.